How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I have got a very special guest for you all. Today, I'm joined by a strength and conditioning coach and educator with Prescript. Today, I'm joined by the one and only Veronica Zuccala. How are you doing today?
Nailed it. I'm great. Nailed the last name. Yeah, I'm doing great. Just wrapped up my work day and excited to chat.
Cool. I'm excited to chat with you as well. But I suppose the first question wrapped up your work day today. But how have you been? What's kind of been happening in your world recently?
Things have been absolutely insane, but in the best possible way. I was talking with a few people on our Prescript labs a couple weeks ago because I facilitate the Thursday labs, and this has been the craziest summer. I've been doing this full time for 7 years, and I always get a drop off of clients a little bit in the summer because people go on vacations, whatever's going on. This has been my busiest work summer in 7 years, which is great. But it's because I've got all my athletes coming in for off season training. I've got teams. I've got clients and athletes that want to come in for more sessions than what they normally do in season. I've got some of my gym pop clients that are just locked and loaded and ready to go crazy. So yeah, it's been a great. And then obviously this summer here, we get 2 months of nice weather a year, and I live in Ottawa, which is in Canada. For those that don't know, so we get two months a year of nice weather. So on top of being busy with work, social life's been popping off too, which is nice. So it's been a busy summer, but I have zero complaints. Yeah.
Nice, cool.
Yeah.
And why do you think it's been so busy? Is it just kind of, you mentioned there been doing this for, 7 years. Is it just kind of like gradually build up over time, or why do you think it's been so busy?
I think it's probably a few things. One being that I definitely have more athletes on my roster this summer than any other summer. I also had my athlete development program going this summer, which was a whole separate little mini training camp twice a week for younger kids, like 12 to 14. I had like that running for 8 hours a week, so which was super great. Ran really well for the first time through. But between that and all the athletes I have on my roster coming in, teams coming in, taking on a role with Prescript. So I'm teaching the L1 course for the first time, which has been an
Yeah.
absolute blast. But again, just like different things adding up, and it's all good stuff. So I'm not mad about it.
Yeah, nice. And one question I always like to ask as well is, for probably myself, but also kind of younger coaches and trainers listening as well. There's, you know, people often mention that sometimes there's like a turning point where there's lots of things happening at once. How do you kind of find balancing? You said there about the social side of things as well, because I think that's important. I think sometimes people think that as coaches and trainers, it's kind of we at some points I have done, but you just kind of like live and breathe the gym 24/7 when you're in there. But how do you kind of balance, managing workload, especially from, coaching, but also delivering the education side of things, plus your own training, plus the social side of things? How do you kind of find balancing that, if you have a balance?
Yeah, I think it's just integrating the right ratios of everything, and I don't always get it right, but it's about integrating things that give me energy back. And fortunately, all the hours that I've added to my like schedule this summer between like teaching Prescript lectures, running labs, working with athletes, working with teams, honestly, all that stuff fuels me and it gives me energy back. Like I walk out of a session fired up and ready to go for another one. So and then when things get really busy and I'm gassed, like my friends give me life so much. I belly laugh so hard when I am with my friends and with my people. So it just gives me energy back. It never feels like it's draining to make social plans. And if I am really tired and feeling like I just need some extra sleep, then I try and plan a night in where I just don't have anything to do. Like tomorrow afternoon, I actually canceled my afternoon. I'm going to have a facial, and then I'm going to go home and sit on my couch and eat popcorn and watch a movie with my dog. So I'm kind of giving myself, I had a really busy week last week, and so I'm giving myself tomorrow night to reset a little bit so I can go into the rest of this, or finish off August and go into the beginning of September with some umph. So yeah,
Yeah.
I just finding things that give me energy back. And again, I don't always get it right. I go through these periods of being on the cusp of burnout and then coming back and we're okay, and then maybe being on the cusp of burnout, coming back, we're okay. So
Yeah.
you make it work, but I find it worth it because I do love what I do and I want to keep getting better at it. And I'm competitive as hell. So it just fuels me to keep going even when I get really gassed and burnt out. So I don't know if
Yeah.
that really answers your question, but that's about what I
Yeah,
do.
no. I always like to ask that question because I know from my point of view, a little bit like what you say, there's certain points where you do get to a point where you're a little bit more tired, you've put in a couple more hours, but what was great to see there is that you can see the passion that you've got for what you do comes across, which is really good. But equally, I think it's really important to know when to just chill out, when to just have like a little bit of a breather, because I think especially and I know most coaches and trainers have been through it, but they go through that thing of putting in loads and loads of hours to kind of um, uh, uh, get stuck into what you're doing and build up that reputation or that client base. But then it gets to a point where actually, looking after yourself is going to allow you to maintain that standard of coaching on the gym floor, which is important. Whereas if you're tired, worn out, don't have that energy, that's going to come across in the sessions that you're delivering. So yeah, I like to ask that
100%.
question just to maybe remind myself, but also help younger coaches know actually, well, anybody that you need to have that, you need to have that balance a little bit. I did quite a brief introduction there, but you've mentioned about obviously, delivering the level one, the coaching that you're already doing. But for everyone listening who might not know your background in terms of how you got into coaching, the position that you're in now, just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So I started out, I actually was working in a hospital doing as a research assistant. I was in the process of applying to do my master's. I had had a temporary contract with the hospital because I did a undergrad thesis with them. I went to school for biology and neuroscience and psychology. It was like my combo undergrad between my majors and minors. Then I started working at the hospital through that program, doing some research part time. And we did this study every year called Participation, where it gives every country around the world a grade for how active or inactive you are. And I just realized as I was sitting there at a desk helping them do this study that I was like, man, Canada got like a D that year. I was like, we're not doing anything to actually help people. This is just like, because I asked one of my bosses, I was like, so what do we do with this information? Like, how do we actually put it into action? And they're like, oh, we don't do that. We tell them the numbers and then we work on next year's report. I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm sitting there like listening to like random like thriller podcasts, not even like educational ones, as I'm like scrolling through my Excel spreadsheets, just wondering what else I'm going to do with my life. And funny enough, I was only working part time, so I was hitting the gym twice a day. I grew up as an athlete and was always very active. And one of the trainers just came up to me and said, "Have you ever thought about being a trainer? They get a bonus when they get trainers hired." So he didn't actually care; he just wanted the bonus. But it was just perfect timing where I was like, yeah, that sounds pretty good actually. That sounds like a lot better than what I'm doing now. So it was a very like off the cuff decision that I started working in a commercial gym. My parents asked what the hell I was doing working in a gym when I was applying for master's degrees and working at a hospital and could end up with a pension and all that secure stuff. And I got in for my master's and I just decided I was going to do both. It didn't take very long. It took me like 3 months of doing both to realize I really loved one more than the other. But
Yeah.
I told myself to see it through, come out with a piece of paper and a good chunk of money at the end of the day from working full time, and then move forward. And so since then, again, as I mentioned, I'm just super competitive. So I keep wanting to be better at this. And I keep finding new avenues to challenge myself physically and with the job, both on the technical and tactical side of things. Loved taking courses, took my first PSL1 back in 2020, fall of 2020. And then I was in the second cohort, I believe, of L3. Stayed in touch with them, been grinding away over here, doing my thing, whatever I can to network with coaches around the world, and got an incredible opportunity to start working with Prescript, which is an absolute dream. So, yeah, that's how we
Nice.
got to where we are today. Bounced around through a few like private gyms over the years after I left the commercial setting, and now we're at where we're at. So,
Nice, cool. And with
yeah.
that, especially, because I always think like what you said there. You've always trained. I think people get involved in fitness, strength conditioning, whatever you want to call it, because they enjoy it, and then they actually end up turning that into a job. For myself, I came back from Australia, worked as a tree surgeon for a little bit, and then a guy was like, "Oh, do you want to start delivering some boot camps?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, cool." And then from there, it kind of like built up. Who and I can imagine, especially the content and information that pre-script put out there, a big influence. But what kind of coaches have kind of influenced your thoughts and philosophies around, coaching and training?
Oof. I mean, one that jumps off the page for me right away is Killian Hamilton. I'm going to give that guy a ton of credit. When I first started taking, obviously, the whole community at Prescript, particularly, I watched a lot of Shallow's lectures when I first took L1. So Jordan Shallow's really opened my mind to how in depth these things could be. And then as I've grown to know both him and Junta, like the way that they created this company and the way that they've created this teaching platform, I have so much respect for both of them. They've both taught me a lot. But the first name that definitely came to mind was Killian Hamilton. Because I remember when I first started taking Prescript, I was like, this guy's nuts. Like, this guy's actually nuts. But I loved the way his brain worked. He was just looking at exercise from a totally different perspective. And I feel like I looked at it from a bit of a different perspective too, because my background for education is neuroscience. So, yes, there's an anatomy aspect to it. I took anatomy classes. I dissected a couple of rabbits because we didn't have cadavers in my school. But outside of that, my background is studying the brain, and so I feel like I look at things a little bit differently. And so to see a guy that came from a construction background and the way he approaches exercise and the way he talked about it, I was like, this is totally different than anything I've heard before. And that's how I feel about Prescript in general too. But over the years, I've had Killian as a mentor, a coach, a friend at different times. When I was competing for jiu-jitsu, he was writing my programs for me. Um, and when I took L3, he was a huge influence for me there too. So yeah, definitely Killian, definitely the community within Prescript in general. Um, Zach Zillner is a huge one for me as well. Zach actually, I try and always pay it forward when coaches message me with questions because I've been so fortunate that the people that I've really looked up to, that I've reached out to, have responded to me. And I actually went to Texas last year and spent a few days with Zach and the women's basketball team while he was in Texas. Now he's out at University of Miami with the men's team. Shout out Zach. But just an incredible human being, an incredible coach. And so those are kind of the names that jump off the page for me. And then, you know what? I'm going to give credit to just like the trainers that I was surrounded with in my first few years at the commercial gym. Not a lot of people, I don't think, get the experience. And I'm not trying to like romanticize it, but I
Yeah.
had a really good team of trainers at the gym I worked at. And there was a lot of really positive role models for me. One being the guy that I'm working at his gym now, my manager at the time that hired me. There was just a lot of positive role models. And it made the career more enticing long term because I saw where it could go. It wasn't just like a gym that had a ton of turnover. It had veteran trainers there that knew what they were doing. So I'm definitely going to give credit to like Sean and Pete and Chad and Mike, all those guys that I worked with back in the day. Like, yeah. So
Nice. I think
those are
that,
my people.
yeah, I think it's good that you mentioned some of the coaches that you worked with starting out. I know that's how I learned a lot because one, they were all a little bit older than me and had that experience, and actually they were good coaches and trainers. Whereas I know from some of the younger coaches that I've worked with who have maybe got qualified, got their education, then gone into some gyms. Unfortunately, there's some cases where not everyone who starts out has that. Is that lucky, if you like? Because I always remember there was one lad. So my previous role back in the UK was kind of like coach development across two gyms. As my role kind of changed, and then the previous gym that he was at, no one had basically told him where he was. Maybe making mistakes and how to fix them, which for everything everybody's development, if everybody kind of like helps each other out and like just nudges that standard up a little bit more, that's only going to benefit the clients and athletes that you're going to be working with. So yeah, I think that's always a good question to ask because yes, there's maybe the bigger names if you like, but also I think you can learn a lot by speaking to and that's what I found over here as well. Coming to Thailand for the first time, speaking to other coaches and trainers in the gyms, you actually learn quite a lot and just have conversations and see and hear different perspectives. Or I'm a big fan of an analogy. So when
Mhm,
people
yeah,
say things or coach things in a different way, I'm like, oh, cool, that's pretty good. Um,
yeah.
Touching on, I know obviously I sent over some topics in mind
Mhm,
to chat about today, and you mentioned earlier about the athletes that you train,
yeah.
and training yourself. But I suppose the first question is because you also mentioned you've got Gen Pop clients as well. Is when when people think about training like an athlete, sometimes it's a thought process of, oh, I need to be like at a certain level. I need to be doing a certain level of sport. Whether that be a Gen Pop client looking in, or if you are currently playing a sport, they have expectations of, oh well, I've seen somebody at a high level do this, this, and this, so I should be doing this. What does training like an athlete look like, mean to you as a coach, if that kind of makes sense?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's funny because it's interchangeable. It's like, is it an athlete training like the way that anybody else would train, or is it Gen Pop clients training like athletes? I think the terms you could use are interchangeable because at the end of the day, it's what's the goal and how do we get there? And there's going to be so many different avenues to get there. But when you break down exercises, it's okay, what positions do we need to put our joints in? How can we get our muscles to take on as much tension and load as possible to see the maximum amount of results? The only real difference, and this can apply for both, is you just have to consider people's lifestyles. So my Gen Pop clients, I can hammer them and then they're going to go sit at their desk and they're going to be a little bit sore, but I don't really care if they're that sore. Like they'll be fine. They'll bounce back in a couple days, but athletes need to go and perform. And if they are too sore, that's when, okay, are we accumulating too much volume? Are we getting to that point where the load they're taking on is going to exceed the tissue tolerance? And then that's when injury. So there's a lot more injury mitigation with athletes, and there's a lot more, um, let's just say, accumulating fatigue because you're accumulating fatigue for both. I'm trying to put this into like how I break it down, but my Gen Pop clients essentially like I can accumulate more fatigue with them depending on the time of year. And my athletes, my goal is to get them to perform at their sport, but that can still look the same. I can still have clients doing a split squat iso with a floating heel because my athletes, okay, maybe it's for tendon stiffness to help them rebound faster off the ground so that they can run faster. For my Gen Pop client, maybe they've been working with me for 4 years. And maybe adding the floating heel is a new element while still maintaining the same quality of movement pattern that I'm looking for. Or maybe they've had Achilles issues in the past, like my 70-year-old client that still golfs and plays hockey a couple times a week with his buddies. That it was before I met him, so I can't remember exactly. It was somewhere between 5 and 7 years ago that he ruptured his Achilles, and his knees, his hips were still giving him some trouble when he came to me. So it's like, all right, like he's doing a lot of the kind of building blocks that some of my athletes are doing to warm up for their movements. And it's because he needs to be able to rotate. He needs to be able to move. He needs to be able to change direction because he's doing all these things. He might just do it. It's going to look differently than my 16-year-old soccer player who's getting ready to like try out for pro teams, you know? So
Yeah.
it looks different, but the training can still be the same in that sense. It just depends on what the client's goals are and how do I want to get them there. But at the end of the day, like you squat, you hinge, you push, you pull, you rotate, you do stuff on one leg, you do stuff with one arm. It's all the same, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that was a good point to finish it off there because the movement patterns that an athlete would do compared to a Gen Pop client, it's still the same. It might just be that the speed at which it moves, the weight that they're using, and I don't know, the equipment that they're using is going to be slightly different because, like what you said right at the start, the goal is going to be slightly different when we're talking about because you're speaking about athletic training, and one thing that you touched on there is that you want them to move well, you want to manage their fatigue, their injuries. When we're looking at it from like a Gen Pop view of things, do you think that sometimes they think that athletic training is that they need to be doing something really intense, whereas actually most Gen Pop clients want to look better, feel better, move better? And when you look at somebody who is an athlete, they've usually got good physiques, which is a byproduct of their training. They feel good because they're probably eating well, they're training regularly, like what you mentioned there about you managing their fatigue a little bit more, and they're moving better because they need to move better for their sport, and you need to keep on top of their movement. Do you think that, for the Gen Pop clients that you've trained, that actually it's just kind of managing that dose a little bit, and actually showing them the benefits of athletic training compared to it being like really, it doesn't have to be really intense, if that kind of makes sense?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think it's funny too because I don't even really talk to my Gem Pop clients about how I train other clients. I just train them.
Yeah.
And then they'll look and they'll see me post like I mostly post my athletes on my Instagram. Once in a while I'll post a Gem Pop client, just more so just because like my athletes like being posted.
Yeah.
Um, but my Gem Pop clients will look and they'll see and they're like, "Oh, cool! I did one of those exercises last week." I'm like, "Yeah, you did. It's a good exercise. Like it's a everybody does Bulgarian split squats. It's one of those things where if they are intimidated, I think that's a great way to put it. Is like you can slowly dose people with things to help them recognize. But I don't even really think I have too many of those conversations of like athletic training versus non-athletic training. It's just straight up like what's your goal? How are we going to get you there? And like you said, athletes like might move a little bit faster. The load might be different. It might look like it's a different intensity, but movement patterns stay pretty consistent. And a big difference too is like if I get an older athlete coming to me, like especially if somebody is like at a semi-pro level or a pro level and top of what they do, they're already really good at their sport. I don't really need to make them more athletic at that point. I need to, like you said, get them moving better so they can feel better so they can perform, which isn't always like fast concentric lockouts and jumping. Sometimes that's just squat, hinge, push, pull. It's just more unilateral than it is bilateral for most of my athletes, which is like probably the biggest differentiating factor I think between Gem Pop and athlete is I have my athletes spend way more time on one leg. My Gem Pop clients spend time on one leg, but not nearly as much as my athletes do. And then I have like my younger athletes because I've trained everywhere from technically last week I went all the way down to 4 years old because I was
Wow.
helping out with a hockey development camp last week, and one of the groups was really young. It was like 4 to 6. It was hilarious. So we played games for the whole hour. And then the other groups, as the kids got older, they were like prospect camps, so they were doing more of a solid workout. So they were playing a lot of games. But some of these kids are at a point where they are trying to get better at their sport. They're trying to become more athletic because they're growing into their bodies. Their hormones are changing, and so those are the clients that I think it's athletic training in the sense that most people think, where it's a lot of jumping and speeds with different things and changing of direction. It's like, okay, but there's still elements of traditional strength training in there too.
Yeah. And moving more towards being on the like athlete side of things, like what you've mentioned there, it needs to be more jumps, it needs to be more faster movements. Whereas actually you mentioned there that, somebody who might be, semi-pro or, have played the sport for quite a while, it's kind of not as bigger changes to the program that you need to make. From your experience, or from the education side of things, is that where you maybe see some coaches get it wrong and think, actually, right, I need to make this exercise even more complex so they feel as though like they're doing even more movement? Or, when we're talking about kind of like exercises or sport specific exercises, that, right, I'm going to invent this new exercises that is going to help somebody for hockey. Whereas actually, from experience as an older coach, I know for myself, sometimes actually, I don't know whether the phrase less is more is the right phrase, or just keeping it simple. Actually, they might not need as much as what you think. What's kind of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I don't know if less is I think the less is more is a fair statement to say. It's we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We don't need to like put our last name beside an exercise that already exists and then change one thing and make it seem like it's our thing. I do some weird exercises with some of my clients. I always test them out first to make sure it actually drives the adaptation that I want. But like, I'll have like a weird banded situation going on. And really, at the end of the day, that's part of mitigating volume or part of like a proprioceptive tactic that I'm trying to use. But yeah, keeping it simple is the best by far. We don't need to overcomplicate things and recognizing that yeah, it's funny to see people like take things far with certain things. I don't know. Keep it basic. It's already somebody's already done it before. So just find
Yeah,
what works and like some of the weird stuff is more just about mitigating volume with
yeah,
athletes, right? So I think to your point, yeah, keeping it simple. I don't know. That's
yeah,
about all I have to say on that.
yeah,
It gets pretty crazy out there on the internet. That's why I'm kind of laughing because I'm thinking of like particular examples. I'm not going to put people on blast, but I'm thinking of like examples and individuals, and I'm like, oh, we didn't need to be doing that. But hey, I think it's just and like I said, I'm also not going to judge other people's training tactics though too, because at the end of the day, your goal is to keep your athletes healthy.
yeah,
So there is an argument to be made that some of this weird stuff that you see on the internet can arguably be like more safe because of the way it's executed. And so in that case, like, hey, maybe like moving in a particular range or doing an exercise a certain way is going to keep the athlete healthy for longer so that they can keep playing and they're already at a point where they're really good at their sport. So our goal as a coach is to keep them performing and that might look a little bit different for some people, but my approach with like actual programming and executing exercise is just keeping it simple.
yeah. It's actually an interesting point that you said there about some of the exercises that you might see on Instagram or wherever people might pick it up. That I think we've a lot of exercises. There's got to be or there is a skill component to it, and the more complex that you make it and you add things in, they're probably not going to be able to load it up as much. They're probably not going to be able to do it with as much speed. So, having that controlling that environment a little bit is interesting. But actually, the underlying formula for success is that you still need to have some load, and if you're spending lots of time trying to learn the skill of an exercise, it's kind of like, is that exercise worth it? Whereas we could maybe do this thing over here and you're still going to get the same end product, but we've loaded it up a little bit more and there's actually a little bit more benefit towards kind of like the end goal. Would you kind of agree with that?
100%. I've got an hour with my athletes. That's how long my sessions are. If I've got a full team, I've got 60 minutes with them, sometimes 59, like depending on how like the transition is in and out of the door. So I don't have a ton of time, and especially if they're in season, I usually see them maybe once a week. When we're in the summer and I see them 3 or 4 times a week, and we have some time to kind of mess around with extra accessories, maybe some newer movements, sure, we'll build some skill in some movements that I think might be helpful. Like I think a common argument that I chat about with people is whether like to do a teach them to do a clean or teach them to do a trap bar power shrug. I always go trap bar power shrug because it's way easier to teach from a technical standpoint. I can load it up way heavier and it's still going to get that full triple extension that I'm looking for when I'm trying to do a clean. But at the end of the day, a clean is a phenomenal movement. If I have the time, I want my athlete to learn it because if they go on to play, I have a lot of teen athletes. If they go on to play college or university sport, their strength coach is probably going to make them clean at some point. Like it's a given that at some point in their life, someone's going to make them do a hang clean or a power clean. And I'd rather them learn it from me before they move on. And so if I do have the time, there are certain movements that are helpful to learn. But if I don't have the time, if I'm with them once a week, all right, trap bar power shrug. If I got them 4 times a week in off season, cool. We'll spend a little more time maybe learning some of the stuff that I know you're going to see down the road, even if it doesn't provide the best like output for adaptation in this particular moment in time. But if I see it having a benefit down the road, I'll try and throw it in for sure.
Yeah.
And then
And
there's also other stuff that just doesn't need to be in there. It's like we can drive a better adaptation by flipping a few things. We don't need to waste anybody's time.
Yeah, and with that, because you've mentioned a couple of times there of what's going to be best time wise. You only have an hour with them. I know from myself with the sports teams that I've worked with, sometimes you might not even have an hour. I've had it where the head coach might be like, right, I want the players out on the field. If they haven't done well at a game on the weekend, right, they're going to be out on the field a little bit more, and there's a lot of things that the environment will just change a little bit. Do you think that, your thought process in your head of, right, I'm going to use this exercise, this is the time that I've got, and about efficiency is, yes, we know that in the index of exercises, some might be a little bit more optimal than others, but actually, if we use this, there's going to be a similar outcome, but the training environment, because like you mentioned there being competitive, sporty, like do you think within an athletic environment that's actually going to be the fill that gap between the difference in how optimal that exercise is? I hope that makes
Well,
sense
exactly.
in my
Yeah.
head.
No,
Yeah.
that's a good point. If I think I'm understanding what you're saying, it's like, okay, is like being optimal really going to make or break their athletic career at the end of the day if something else is going to provide a similar adaptation? Yeah, absolutely. And again, my goal, like, I'm not a hockey coach, I'm not a soccer coach, I'm not a football coach. I'm not there to get them better at those skills. I'm there to help them move better in the weight room so that it can translate to sport. And there are certain exercises or certain speeds at which we'll do things to help with that. But at the end of the day, if they do a barbell incline bench or a neutral grip dumbbell incline bench, depending on, or a standing cable press, depending on what's available at the moment. Because if you've ever worked in a gym with people, I have some days where I've got like 9 to 11 clients in a day, and that's not including like workout times and transitions and doing other stuff. So it's like if you have ever been in a gym and you've got 11 clients in a day and you're surrounded by other trainers and other people working out, sometimes you don't get the equipment that you want, and you just gotta like pivot. And my clients know that too. Like you got to be really good at adapting. You try not to, you never make a big deal out of it. And sometimes I don't even let my clients know that we're pivoting. I just pretend like it was the plan the whole time. But if I walk in and see all the racks taken, I'm like, all right, we're doing some heavy ass split squats with dumbbells now because there's no barbell available to do your back squats. It's like, all right, this is what we're doing today. Perfect. And
Yeah.
so you have to be really good at adapting. And it's like just what's the theme of the day? What's the name of the game? What's the adaptation? How much volume am I trying to accumulate to get them set up for their next game, practice, whatever it may be, and go from there. So it's just as important to go in prepared as it is to be good at adapting in any gym situation. And so, yeah, if my goal is the quad, all right, I'm gonna find a split squat variation that's gonna crank your quads. Perfect. We'll make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. I really, really like that. Really, really like that thought process because, yeah, I've done it before where I 100 like as soon as you said that, I was like, I 100% know what you're talking about. Because it happens, and actually, it's kind of like what's that phrase? Fake it till you make it. Yep, cool. So we weren't intending to do squats today. This was 100% on the plan. This is what we're going to do. But actually, I'm this might be a little bit of a tangent, but I'm also a big believer in like when I said there about the kind of environment that that feeling good, feeling strong, feeling as though they've done something. Actually, sometimes that's going to be um, that's going to have a bigger impact. Say they're training with you on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, and then they're, competing on a weekend. You just want them to be feeling good and in that good position. And actually, there's a couple of exercises in there that, might not be the most optimal, but that's what makes them feels good. I know I've for sport mainly just worked in like rugby league and rugby union.
Yeah, cool.
Started off in kind of the like scholars, which is like 14 to 16, and then
Mhm.
academy is like 17 to 21. And now my standing joke is that the bicep, most important muscle in the body. Everybody loves two tickets to the gun show, and the because obviously they were like young men, young lads. They wanted to have. Yes, they were already. Like you mentioned it earlier about the growing into their bodies, the developing, getting bigger, getting stronger. But they loved doing finishing with some arms.
Yeah.
Yes, like there's probably some reason that would be beneficial, but actually, it just made him at the end of the session, just made him feel good.
Fired
They,
up. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, and it's kind of that thing of, if you took that out, because I mean, literally, sometimes I would just put a timer on and be like, right, you've got 2 minutes, 3 minutes, end of the session. This is what we're going to try. This is what we're going to try and do. Could that
Yeah.
2 and 3 minutes be used for something a little bit more optimal? Could we have had that time used for something else earlier on? Maybe, but for those 2 3 minutes, is that going to have a big impact within their athletic career? Later down the line, probably not. And I think that's why talking about exercise selection, what would it be ultimately like? You've just got to try and do the best with the athlete in front of you, and just think about their goal. Because ultimately, if they're performing well, then you don't need to be mixing the formula too much. What do you kind of think?
100%. You need to create a good culture and a good energy in the gym. So when my clients come in, I want it to be a fun part of their day. I want it to be something that they look forward to. And yeah, like they might get cooked and they might be sore, but if spending those last 2 3 minutes doing a gun run or doing something that they really enjoy is what keeps them like excited. And again, that's hopefully not the only thing that they enjoy about the session, but it's funny because you say, those last couple minutes, like, is it really going to be valuable long-term athletic career? I would actually counter that with the point that you made makes those 3 minutes very valuable. If you use those 3 minutes to make sure that they're actually doing something that they like and that they're enjoying it. And I mean, we can always justify everything. Like you can justify, hey, biceps also means that we're creating shoulder stability for everybody who took L1. So bicep exercises are functional as hell. We're going to do biceps because it's great for your shoulder function. We'll tell people we can justify all of it. I play balloon games with my kids. I'm like, oh, change of direction drill. This is great.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing. We're going to play keep up for the next 5 minutes, and it's all change of direction and moving quickly and working on agility. They're like, sweet, this is awesome. I'm like, perfect. We're literally playing keep up with a balloon.
Yeah, and that goes quite nicely into because I saw you shared some content about this, which I thought was really really good, and a guy that I used to work with, still a really really good friend of mine. He played games with his athletes, and tried to do it. He went down the route of trying to make it, sport specific, but also in his so the previous gym that I used to work at, we ran an like an athlete program, but within that program we had rugby players, hockey players, we had ultimate frisbee players, which was actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
All aspects of like what you said there about agility plays some role within their sport. It just wasn't like super specific, so it was like, how can we train all these together? What is the apart from being fun, what's the kind of importance of games? How can you kind of implement them into training, and what are the benefits? What are the benefits of them?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, benefits. Games are super important in terms of like earlier development because it provides a constraint for kids, right? So particularly this is more for like really young kids where in terms of brain development, it's really helpful to give them structure and a constraint, but then it still allows them to have some creativity and freedom to move and do what they want. So from early development, like there's a ton of benefit to any game you're going to play. It was funny because last week's a really good example. Last week I was working with this hockey development camp, and so the youngest group I had was 4 to 6. The oldest group I had was like 15 to 17 year olds. And so as the age groups got older, it was like all games and like mostly workout with a little bit of games. And like that ratio just changed as the age groups went up. But even with my teams, I see pro athletes playing games all the time. So as far as like it's super great for neuroplasticity, super great for sensory motor like coordination and connection, like understanding like input output. Super important, especially for like kids and teens for emotional regulation. You should have seen the 12 to 14-year-olds I had in my athlete development program this summer would get so heated over like playing a game where they stand in a circle and I just say go and they let go of the stick they have and grab the next one before it drops. And they got heated over like a bunch of PVC pipes, which was electric. So it's good for emotional regulation too in that sense, but exercise in general just stimulates BDNF, like super good for your brain and just making sure that we're learning, we're adapting, we're firing and creating stronger connections between our neurons. And so what games allow for is an equal combination of structure and freedom. So you kind of have, but your brain's always working as a whole. So like there's the left brain, right brain, like kind of argument, and you'll see the difference. The only reason they talk about a difference is because physically as structures they are different in your brain, but also there are different structures that exist within the left side that don't necessarily exist within the right side, like your Wernicke's area, Broca's area, which are both responsible for your Wernicke's is responsible for your like taking in and understanding and comprehension of speech, and then Broca's area is responsible for actual like execution of your speech. And so those exist on the left side of your brain. And so you see a lot of arguments where it's like, okay, left side's like that logic side, right side's that creative side. But then you also have like your parietal lobes on both sides are responsible for spatial awareness. Your cerebellum's important for motor control in general. You have your basal ganglia that's responsible for like planning of movements that then has to communicate to other parts of your brain to actually execute those movements. And so there's a lot of moving parts there. And what games do is they stimulate all these different areas of your brain that I'm mentioning all at once. And exercise in general will stimulate a lot of things, but because games require strategy and there's extra constraints involved, like if I have them throwing a balloon around or trying to catch a stick, whatever it may be. So there's a lot of added elements. And I think people put it in really simple terms when they're like, oh yeah, hand-eye coordination and all that stuff. And that's absolutely true. Like that's the simplest way to put it. It's like hand-eye coordination, footwork, sure. But at the end of the day, it's also doing a lot more for your brain than how we like to describe it. And so I think that point is important to get considered as well. But at the end of the day, and when it really comes down to it, it is fun. And when you're working with kids, you have to keep them engaged. They don't want to talk about what they did on the weekend, like my Gen Pop clients do. We don't want to exchange funny stories or talk. They don't want to complain about work and their kids. Like kids want to play. They want to move the whole hour that they're there. And I can't have them doing a full hour of heavy loaded exercises. So we play games in between,
Yeah.
keep them engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, you said there about as the ages went up, the amount of games that you would play, the ratio kind of like changes a little bit, which, I completely get. Sometimes there's the thought process that how much of a role does strength conditioning actually help them with their sport? Us chatting here, we know that there is a benefit to it. Whereas, probably some parents are just like, well, no, they just need to be kicking a ball more. They need to be doing that, which I do agree. You only get better at doing the sport by actually doing that. But in terms of, all those benefits that you've listed there in terms of development, is that kind of where the seeds are sown, if you like, in terms of how strength and conditioning can benefit and get, these younger athletes better at their sport as they're growing, as they're, getting stronger, getting fitter naturally, but that strength and conditioning side of things is kind of just nurturing that a little bit more, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think where strength conditioning can separate itself in terms of like the justification for young kids doing strength and conditioning training. Where strength and conditioning can separate itself is you're learning quality of movement very early on. And so I think it's actually the controlled part of strength and conditioning sessions that provide that benefit because they can get the chaotic like strategy games, they could get it by playing another sport. Like I've always kind of said if last week was different because it was part of the curriculum for this development camp to have a strength and conditioning session. So it didn't matter what age group, everybody had a session with me every day. But younger kids, and it's good to expose them to it because I think that'll also help build habits later on. So I think any exposure that they can get to the world of doing more outside your sport is helpful. But at the end of the day, like really little kids between the ages of like 4 and 8, if their parents want them to do more, just sign them up for another sport because it gives them a totally separate constraint away. It gives them all the same benefits that like playing games in a gym would. But if you want them to learn the movement quality, that's where strength and conditioning can separate itself because it does have that element of control and then the games add the chaos. Whereas sports at that age are just chaos because
Yeah.
kids don't even follow the rules. If you've ever seen like 4-year-olds play soccer, they just like follow each other around until one of them finds a dandelion and then they all sit on the grass. So it's just, it's chaotic. But so I think that's where strength and conditioning can actually separate itself is with that element of control. And I always like, I strongly advocate that particularly females should start a little bit sooner because hormonally the fluctuation just makes females at a greater risk for potential injury because their tendons and ligaments, as estrogen changes and fluctuates as they're going through puberty, tendons and ligaments will get more lax at certain times of the month rather than others. And so for younger females, I'd say like preteen, like 10 to 12 years old is a great time to kind of just start introducing the gym and learning those movement qualities. Boys can start a little bit later if they want to, but at the end of the day, I think the element of control is what separates strength and conditioning. And if you can have kids learning that at any age, like I know a coach here in the city that worked for the same company I worked for when I started. He had his kids doing a powerlifting meet, which is electric. They were like 7 years old and 9 years old, and they were out powerlifting because their dad taught them how to like move properly, which I think is so cool. And they were so into it. They do a lot of
Yeah.
other stuff too. Like they play sports and play games and do whatever, but that they were doing a quality sumo deadlift at their first ever powerlifting meet, and there was a video posted. It was so cool. So I think learning movement quality is going to be helpful at any age, at any time in your life. But really little kids, like sign them up for more sports. Just have them do a bunch of different stuff, a bunch of different implements. Do stuff like sports that require hand-eye, sports that require foot-eye, like swimming, like jiu-jitsu, roll around on the ground a little bit, whatever. Do a bunch of different stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it goes back to what we started talking about at the right at the start. You know, it's kind of all the same stuff. It's just that the dosage might change a little bit. You know, how much time you spend on one thing. You know, obviously dependent on the level that they're at. You know, elite level athletes, you might not have a lot of time with them, depending on where they are in the season, compared to somebody just starting out. You know, like kids. You know, you might have a little bit more time with them. So yeah, thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on, Veronica. A few tangents thrown in there, but some really good topics and information covered. But the last question that I like to ask for gym goers, athletes listening, but also for the coaches and trainers out there listening, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom from what we've chatted about today?
Take home points for what we've talked about today. I would say, oof. I mean, my big take home point in general is learn what effort really is early on, and it'll make everything a lot easier. That goes for like relationships, that goes for your job, that goes for your workouts, but learn what effort is real early on and actually put in the effort, and you'll get where you need to be. Because that's what athletes are doing. Like all the athletes that I'm training, they're putting in extra work coming to see me. This is not something that their team is making them do. They and their parents have decided that this is extra work that they want to take on. And when they come in, like they put in effort. And it's taking them further than somebody who's not putting in that effort. So, and at the end of the day, even if you're putting in all this effort to play a sport and you don't end up playing that sport at a super high level or professionally or elite level, you learn so much when you understand how to put in effort. All my friends that grew up playing competitive sports knew that early on, and now they're all super successful in everything that they do. So I think I think that's a takeaway message. Just learn what effort is early on, apply it to everything, and it'll pay off, whether it's in the gym or in life. So
Yeah, I think that's a really good nugget of word of wisdom there because yeah, I think in a not to be too philosophical, but in an age that we're in now where information is so readily available and you can get everything so readily available, whether that be food delivered to your door or asking a question on ChatGPT to get an answer, it requires very little effort. Whereas actually, yeah, it's surprising how much, even a little bit of effort in the right direction, how much you can influence a lot of things. So no, I thought that was a really good words of wisdom there for
Well,
everyone
thanks for having
listening.
me on. Appreciate it.
No problem at all. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. And if anyone's got any questions about what we've chatted about today, want to see the content that you put out there, or if people just want to reach out to you and speak to you, where could people find you, Veronica?
You can find me. Instagram's pretty easy. I'm pretty good at replying to DMs. It's my full name, Veronica Zuccala. Last name is Zuccala, and that's Veronica with a C. But yeah, I'm pretty good at replying to DMs. Like I mentioned earlier in this chat, I've been really fortunate where the coaches and the people in this world that I've reached out to have been really gracious and helped me out and been willing to answer my questions. So I'm always happy to chat and answer questions for other people. So never hesitate to reach out. And Instagram's probably the easiest place to find me.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.